Oh, yes.
Welcome back, everyone, and judging by this massive box in front of me, you can tell that it's time to review the new Transformers Generation Selects God Neptune. God Neptune, as you probably already know, is a redeco and even minor retool of the King Poseidon combiner that was released piecemeal by TakaraTomy as part of their Generation Selects line. And the whole set is a callback to the Beast Wars 2 character, whose toy was a direct redeco of the original Predacon or King Poseidon combiner. So if you've seen my reviews before, you know how this goes. We're going to take a look at the toy's packaging. This one has several layers, being a Takara Selects. And we'll open it up, we'll see what's inside, we'll look at the instructions, and then we'll get a look at all of the figures themselves. There's 5 members of this team, so we're going to see their beast modes, robot modes, and then naturally their combined form, God Neptune. Of course, I'll be doing plenty of comparisons with the King Poseidon team. And then at the end of the video, I'll give my final thoughts. So you can see that this multi-pack comes in a very large yet flat square box. You got this overbox here, which has got the TakaraTomy Generation Selects 10, Transformers, Generation Selects, all the branding, all that fun stuff. Same thing, more or less, on the back. Not the most exciting thing, but that's just kind of the style they're doing these in. Once you remove the outer box, you're greeted with the inner box with this really nice black sleeve over it. And you can see we have renders for the individual teammates. And then a big shot of God Neptune in the background. This looks really cool, by the way. I'm digging this. I mean, it's nothing new for their style, but just seeing it all come together in a big box set is really, really awesome. They still carry the whole Generation Selects typo or misspelling or whatever you want to call it. I don't know why they haven't updated that unless that just really is what they want to call it. I don't know. It's weird you think after all these releases they would have gone and changed that. So, yeah, very, very cool in the front. The back, get a big old Predacon symbol, which is really fitting considering what toy line we're going into next year. You know, with Kingdom being a revival of the Beast Wars franchise. And as a child of the late 80s and early 90s, I love this. Seeing this familiar symbol on the packaging just fills me with joy. And if you are to go ahead and remove this outer sleeve, very carefully, as not to damage it, you get a pizza box. Really looks like a pizza box, doesn't it? And again, you get the awesome Predacon symbol front and center. Transformers Generation Selects again. And that's about all there is to see. A little bit of striping and detailing on the sides. Nothing too crazy. Now we gotta open up our pizza box. So let's pull the flap carefully. Nice and neat. Okay, so we get this, which is just your regular Generations Selects logo. Now that's funny, right? Because the outside of the box says Generation, and then the inside of the very same box says Generations. Go figure. I'm gonna go free camera mode for this because it's huge. All right, so this is what we got. Boy, almost too bright, isn't it? All right, so you can see our guys here. You see the combiner hands right there, the feet over there, chest piece, big old gun. He's got 3 hands, 4 hands. Oh. That's interesting. I didn't think they were going to include extra hands here. That's interesting. Wasn't expecting that. But okay. Well, more accessories the better, I guess. Oh, it's on 2 different trays. Does make it easier getting these things out. So, check them out. These are so bright white I may actually have to turn down the exposure levels. Normally my videos are too dark. Okay, here's our instruction book. You can see it's pretty good size, which I would hope so, considering how much it has to cover. Up at the top, you get kind of your parts layout, the accessories, the different team members, all that. And carefully open this up. It's already a little ripped just in the packaging. It's got this little tear up top. Kind of stinks, but oh well. Flip this down. Okay, so look what we get here. So it starts out with our leader, and this covers, let's see, transformation from beast to robot, and then from robot, looks like to the torso mode there. Shows you how to store the accessories. And some more storage. I mean, so it looks like pretty much all the same stuff that was on the individual instructions, as far as I can tell. So that's good. You want it thorough, right? Because if you didn't happen to buy the King Poseidon set, you might be a little confused with how everything's supposed to work, you know, having never touched these before. It shows you how to put the sword together. Now, does it say anything about the combined gun mode? I don't think it does. So this guy, unlike King Poseidon, is supposed to have like one official gun configuration. Since he only has the 5 members, so it's not really modular. Or doesn't have to be anyway. They don't seem to have it on here, so I'll probably have to reference some Takara pictures to get the gun configuration right. That's a shame. All right, so the instructions are mostly complete, minus that little tidbit there. And again, because it's Takara, it's nice and glossy and pretty, unlike the tissue paper thin Hasbro instructions. All right, let's kick this off with a group shot of our new Seacons in their beast modes. From the left to the right, you have Scylla, Sea Phantom, Halfshell, Silagon, and Terrormander. So very interesting, very different names from their mold mates. Some things to point out. In the case of Skilla, there's some debate over whether it's pronounced Skilla or Scylla. I'm going with the most direct Latin translation, since she is named after a Greek mythological creature. So we call her Skilla. And then with Silagon, it's spelled like Coelagon, like a coelacanth. So it's not spelled like sea, like the ocean or what you do with your eyes. And then the rest are, pretty straightforward. Now, one thing I really love about seeing them all together as a group is the very uniform color scheme that they have. The Generation 1 Seacons, they have a somewhat uniform color scheme, but it's kind of broken up into about 2.5 different variations. And it basically comes down to the legs being one color, the arms being another color, and then the torso just kind of borrowing a little bit from both. So it's not too bad, but I do like the greater uniformity that we see here. They really look like they're supposed to be part of a team, kind of like the Constructicons. All right, now zooming way, way out, we can get a big group shot with the Seacon's Generation 1 counterparts. I know that gets confusing because both teams are called the Seacons, but they are separate individuals. Though it's been recently revealed that apparently Turtler and Halfshell over here are brothers, so that could explain the inspiration, right? That Halfshell would create a team or, format a team or something that resembles his brother's old team. They had some crazy time travel-y hijinks going on in the tie-in manga for these guys, so it's worth taking a look at to get a deeper understanding of what's going on here. So on this side, you get the G1 counterparts. There's Tentakill, Overbite, Turtler, Gulf, Kraken, and the 6th member, who doesn't have a counterpart for this, Lobclaw. Of course, those are the Japanese names for the characters because these are Japanese releases. And as such, they have a very different characterization than their US counterparts. In Japan, the only sentient transformer in this whole group is Turtler. And then all the rest of these guys are drones, and they're mass-produced, and they can be swapped out at will, whatever. The Beast Wars 2 Seacons are all individuals with very distinct personalities, and they're some sort of a space pirate crew. They all have that little bend to them, which is, fitting given their alt modes. In the US, the G1 Seacons, if you don't know, had completely different names. They all had unique personalities. Tentakill and Overbite kept the same names, but Turtler was Snaptrap, Gulf was Scalor, Kraken was Seawing, and then Lobclaw was Nautilator, who's probably the most infamous because he's a blithering idiot in the US media, so poor guy, that's his legacy. Okay, so I think the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to start with the leader character, and then I'll do the limb bots in alphabetical order. So let's go ahead and do it that way. So our first guy up, like I said, is going to be Halfshell. He's the leader of the group. He is a direct redeco of Turtler, or Snaptrap. And the character comes very heavily armed. You know, he's like a turtle of war, and he's just got all these cannons and guns and everything on top of his shell. Now, the 3 on top here, they're optional. They're more for storage than anything. But unlike a lot of the characters who do have all this extra weapon storage, his don't really look out of place. It looks very fitting. He's kind of like a Blastoise on steroids, you know? He's just Blastoise to the nth degree with all the cannons. But if you don't like having all this stuff on here, you can always take it off. These bits are, of course, the combiner feet. They have the little machine guns on them. Which, interestingly enough, the new Volcanicus that's coming out actually reuses these little machine gun parts. But not the feet. It's an interesting thing. So you get all that. And he's also got his sword stored on his underbelly. Let's go ahead and remove that. Just kind of keep him vanilla. And here you go. As far as articulation, you know, his knees bend. He can swivel a bit, though I don't know why you would. And these can move, but man, you're going to make it hard for him to stand right. And his front legs, aside from like rotating and bending inward a little bit, don't really articulate. The head can move up and down, and the mouth does open and close. And it kind of snaps, which is fitting because he's based on a guy called Snaptrap. I don't remember if the Turtler one does. I'll have to check that in a minute. Now the cannons, they're interesting because the instructions never cover this, but the cannon barrels can actually extend out or be pushed back in. And I always assumed that the point of that was that they're going to be pushed inward in his beast and robot modes and then pulled out in combiner mode just to make them look bigger. I'm thinking that was the intention, but I don't know for sure. I also want to point out the really nicely tampographed Predacon symbol on his head. Really dig that. And it's cool because, you know, it'll show up on his chest. So overall, I mean, this guy is really, really well done. He's got tons of that nice metallic green paint to match the plastic, and it matches it very well, too. Great color matching. Beautiful gold paint. He's one of the few guys that actually uses this, like, copper-colored paint here. The pieces themselves are actually green. And, you know, the face is beautifully done. The inside of his mouth, there's multiple layers, the jaw. I mean, look at that. That is just beautiful. I love it. And here we can bust out the OG leader, Turtler, just so you can see how they compare. They both do the faction symbol on the head thing, though Turtler's is a bit further back. He's also got the faction symbol on the chest plate. I will say, overall, he's got fewer paint apps. Turtler there. He just really doesn't match when it comes to just really neat little touches they put on Halfshell. You know, the shoulders, the area around the eyes, they're not painted. So I'd say, honestly, Halfshell is a bit more impressive looking. Plus, I just like the colors more. And probably going to hear me say that a lot. I overall am probably just going to prefer the colors on God Neptune because most people prefer the colors in God Neptune. It's just gorgeous. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and transform this guy to robot mode. And I'll put this disclaimer out for all of the characters that we're looking at. If you want to see the transformation, because I don't want this review to just go on forever and bore people to death, make sure to check out the reviews for their respective mold mates, because I cover the transformations there. That way, if you need any help, you can always go look that up. But I really don't want to make a 2-hour review, you know? Nobody's going to watch it. Okay, so here's our robot mode. And you can see when he's not armed, he's actually a very lithe-looking character. Now, the tolerances on this guy all feel pretty good. Haven't noticed any big departure from the Turtler version, with one exception. It's kind of a weird thing. So, on this shoulder ratchet specifically, when you're swinging it down, you eventually reach a point where it kind of gives. You see that? And it makes kind of like a crunch. It worries me a little bit. You know, ratchet joints, while sturdy, are prone to breakage. So I hope that's not the case. I mean, I've had characters that have had similarly weird ratchets that do stuff like that. Power of the Prime Starscream is a good example. Haven't had any breakage yet, but I do know for a fact that my Turtler doesn't have that issue. So just something to keep your eye on. Hopefully it's a big nothing for her. So, just like Turtler, this guy can become quite heavily armed. by default, he's supposed to have his cannons on his back. So you go ahead and officially you're supposed to place them to where they're the kind of higher end of these ridges is facing out. I don't know if it matters, but that's the way the instructions tell you to do it. So you get those on there. Then this one's pretty optional, but it's more complete. You can attach his little machine gun combiner feet to his legs. You just want to flip these little panels around to where the holes are facing the outside. Gives him a less clean look, but makes him more compatible with these, and by extension, like War for Seibertron stuff as well, right? Because they're all about those 5mm ports all over their bodies. So it's kind of like a double whammy, I guess. So you can go this route if you want to soup up his legs. The next thing, he gets his big cannon. Now for right now, I'm going to go ahead and place it on his back. You just plug it in, this little white spot right here. Now you're going to have to do a bit of a balancing act with this guy because just like Snaptrap, his ankles are pretty loose because they're like ball joints on hinges and not the most sturdy thing in the world. So just be aware weight will shift as you add stuff. Here's his sword. And then lastly, his shield. Use that big hole right in the middle to plug on to this post on his forearm. All right, so this is your guy fully armed with all of his accessories. And just like in his beast mode, he carries it better than a lot of his teammates as far as the whole, full loadout. Now he's got a few options with how to actually wield these things. So this is what I consider like his standard sword and board configuration. But you can also have him store his sword behind his shield here. There's a good little storage spot where it just kind of grooves in perfectly. And have him wield his cannon if you want, more range capability. And then there's this third option that the instructions just briefly mention, and I don't think that Turtler's instructions had this. I think it's a new thing. I could be wrong. I have to go back and check. But there's some sort of like a crossbow cannon thing. So let me show you that. So you get this big old thing. And you can see you take all three of his cannons, plug them together, put his little shield piece on top, and you angle those shoulder accents, whatever to call them, at kind of an angle and give it this very crossbow-like appearance. Now, it's cool, but he can't really wield it properly because, unfortunately, his elbows are not ratcheted, I can't talk, and they really can't support the weight of this thing. It's just too much for his little elbows to bear. So, it's a neat little bonus, I guess. Something that would probably work better for his combined form, but then, of course, the combiner would lose its chest plate, so you got to think about that. But yeah, it's there, it exists, and I'm pretty sure it's new to this version of the mold. Not that you can't build it with Turtler, but just the first time we've seen it. And here's our second quick group shot with Snaptrap, or Turtler, if you will. And you can see, as far as molding, these guys are identical. Nothing new to see there as far as parts and all that are concerned. But their color schemes are quite different from one another yet again. And you'll also notice that their plastic color layout is very much the same. Might even be identical, come to think of it, as far as what colors go where. If not, it's pretty close. So the biggest thing differentiating them are just the actual colors chosen and the paint details. But yeah, both of these guys, they are very wobbly on their feet. So, they're kind of a posing nightmare, but they both just strike this really impressive, very brutal visage. Up next is Silagon, the coelacanth. And I gotta say, this character is just beautiful looking, despite the fact that he's an ugly fish. Just the amount of silver and bright gold paint on him, the kind of deep jade all over. I mean, he is pretty to the point of being gaudy, honestly. But he's just so cool looking. Really shows off the unique color scheme for this team. As far as, posability, he's got all your standard stuff. Everything works the way like it did on Gulf. Here you see all the extra weapon storage. Now, having this on his underbelly, while a good place to put it, does inhibit his ability to kind of move his hips around. So let's remove that, close the chest panel up. And let's go ahead and take off his combiner hand too, because it just looks kind of silly. So let's get those out of the way. So you can really just move around and breathe a little bit. Yeah, look at this guy. He is just great. Just picture him complaining like a grumpy old man about everything. I love this dude. The little tail fin looks great. It's done up in all that gold and silver too. I don't know, I guess I'm just a sucker for nice shiny things. Alright, here's the mold mate Gulf. And just like I was saying with the comparison between Halfshell and Turtler, same thing kind of goes here, is that Gulf's just a bit plainer looking. He doesn't have as much of a color breakup as Silagon does. Again, no slouch. He's actually got quite a bit of paint, especially a lot of that like matte pink there. But you can just see he's not quite as intricate in his paint scheme. So you can see that a lot of the budget that they must have saved by not including a 6th member really went to the paint on these guys. So they just went all out. And again, I kind of prefer Silagon. The bordering around the eyes, I think really helps the look of this thing. Gulf, I don't know, his eyes just look a little bit squinty without that extra detail. But they're fine. Yeah, can't hate on either one. Here's Silagon's robot mode. And you can see it comes across very nicely. It's got the big old backpack still, but nothing too bad. The instructions don't tell you to store these cannons there, but there's really no point in removing them if you don't have to. You see he's got his little tail gun, he's got his little spine sword, whatever you want to call it. His chest piece can flip down, like you saw in the beast mode, and that can accommodate all sorts of accessories, prime armor, what have you. Can technically attach his combiner hand there, but it looks really silly and unwieldy. And there are places you can store the combiner hand, especially like in the back here. But it looks silly, it makes him very back heavy, and you know the instructions don't really give you any sort of guidance on that, so I prefer to just leave it off. It looks pretty bad when it's just hanging off him like that. And here's Gulf for comparison. You can see, again, no difference in molding between these guys, but a lot of difference in the paint layout. One thing you'll notice is that Silagon lacks a faction symbol, like all over his body. He just doesn't have one. And I think that may actually be the case for all of the Limbots. We'll find out as we go through them, but yeah, I don't think any of the Limbots have a Predacon symbol. The only one that has a symbol is Halfshell, right there on his turtle head. Some things to point out. This little backpack piece, it does still have that tendency to pop off with the slightest bit of handling from its tabs. And it seems on this guy it might even be a little bit worse because there's no paint on this torso to kind of, I don't know, make it stick a little bit. You know, there's less friction holding it on there. On the plus side, his wrists seem to be a bit more sturdy than Gulf's. His wrists tend to go a little limp there from weight. And you gotta like pose it very carefully, and even then they'll still probably flop down over time. So just, I guess there's pros and cons. The backpack's a little less stable, but the wrists are better. And of course, that could just be my copy. Your copy might have loose wrists, it might not. Right up next, we have Skilla, or Scylla, however you want to say it. And she maintains the Kraken-like, mutant-esque beast mode from Tentakill. And you can see some of the remolding that's been done from here, particularly the robot chest and upper arms, but we'll get more into that in robot mode. But overall, you know, nice little redeco. You got the storage on the back of the head, which these are the official places. If you don't like it, then be gone, accessories. We'll just go ahead and have her get a nice clean look there. Though now you can see some robot legs, so maybe it's not that clean. And, you know, overall, she looks really nice. She doesn't have quite the crazy color breakup that Tentakill has, opting for some more uniform colors. One thing to point out that's kind of funny is Tentakill, he's already known for having these luscious lips that you had to wonder what was in the water, you know, when the designers were making him back in the day. Like, all right, squid monster with legs and big old puckers, you know? I don't know where, you know, what they were thinking. But they kind of capitalize on that with Scylla's design, both here in the original, especially in the cartoon, and they made the lips pink to imply some sort of lipstick. If you don't know, Scylla was known as being this love-struck Predacon who was obsessed with the Maximal Scuba and was always fawning over him. And she was kind of drawn to be kind of silly. She was a comic relief type character. Now, that doesn't translate over very well into the toy because I didn't remold the squid face to look any less intimidating. It's just got lipstick on now, so it's just like an angry lady. And here's the mold mate Tentakill. And like I said, there's just much more of a color breakup on this guy. He's a little more interesting to look at. So he actually kind of wins out here, I think. Now, one thing that really helps him as well is that his robot legs, they're very flat, very, very squared off. So they help fill out the back of the squid head a lot better instead of looking like obvious legs like, hers do. But it's not that big a deal. It is what it is. And yeah, they're both good in their own right. But I think I prefer Tentakill a little bit more. Especially the eyes. The bright yellow eyes just really help them stand out. Hers, they kind of just blur into the background because they're just closer in hue to her lips and to her little face mask design here. So she's not bad, but a little bit less interesting. Here's Scylla's robot mode. And you can see there's a whole lot of new here. The head is a new sculpt, and it is similar in appearance to the design of Tentakill's robot head, but it's just kind of been given more of a curved nature to it, especially on the sides and kind of a smaller face. So you can tell it came from the same base design, and then just some artistic license was taken to, make it appear more feminine in the cartoon, so that's what this is based off of. And the chest is, again, has some similar design elements, but has been reworked a lot. It is to give her more of an appearance of breasts, admittedly, to just kind of help distinguish that, yes, this is a female. And, for anyone that has a problem with that, their idea, not mine. I'm just explaining the process. And additionally, while she's been retooled, she's also been detooled in a way. Now, what I mean by that is Tentakill is a very, very heavy retool of the Moonracer mold. And in addition to the numerous, new kibble and all that he was given new arms and legs. Well, for Skilla, to make her, again, appear more feminine, they actually went back to using the upper arms and the upper and lower legs that were from the original version, the Moonracer. So it's just their way of further distinguishing her from her most recent mold mate. And, it pulls it off pretty well. It makes her look a lot like she does in the cartoon. And, Takara, their big focus is cartoon accuracy, so it would make sense that they do that. Speaking of Tentakill, here he is. Just to really highlight the differences between them. Not only the obvious with the colors, but you can see the heads are different shapes. The chests, again, are different, though they do still have that kind of ridged pectoral motif. The legs, as you can see here, are much boxier on this guy and just kind of a whole new design. And the upper arms, too. They're thicker, they're more plated looking. So, again, I like this. I do really like the fact that they bothered to retool her to help set her apart from Tentakill and make her look more like her show appearance. Because they could have just recolored it and called it a day. I mean, that's what they did for the original toy. So it is good to see some variety. And I would say that I wish there had been more retooling, but honestly, I don't think any of the other Seacons, I don't think their Beast Wars 2 cartoon appearance differed enough from the original designs to really warrant a change, so it's good that they went this far, but not too far. And to give you some visual cues, here is Moonracer, just so you can see that the parts are indeed the same between the upper arms, the thighs, the lower legs, the knees, all that. Of course, the kibble, the feet, and the lower arms are still the same. And, oh yeah, one thing I didn't point out, the hands, too. Tentakill actually does have retooled hands that are just, again, a little more squared off, more plated looking, more G1 looking, whereas she opts for going back to the more slender hands of the Moonracer mold. So yeah, almost missed that one, but it's true. They retooled the hands too, or detooled them in this case. Up next in order, we have Sea Phantom, who's the Raid Echo of Overbite. And he is, some sort of bipedal shark monster thing with claws. And yeah, personally, I think this is my least favorite of the different Seacon molds. It's just kind of very plain. He's just a long thing with a shark face and little legs. But it's not bad by any means. It just, to me, is like the least interesting. You can see he's really got some great paint apps. He's got gold on the shoulders. He's got silver, like a chromed silver on his hands next to the more flat silver of the claws. Gold on the head, the red eyes with the green outline, and he's got silver around his lower jaw with red in the inside. However, that red does bleed through the plastic a little bit because it is somewhat translucent, so it looks a little weird, kind of fleshy. Gold on the chest, silver on the tail tips there, silver on the fin. A lot of silver, a lot more silver than gold on this guy. So overall, he's okay. Tolerances are still great. Everything moves the way it should. The mouth opens and closes, all that. And of course, he's got the extra accessories that you can choose to keep or remove and get rid of them if you so choose. Just come off like so. I'll give you a kind of a nice, clean shark mode, which is pretty impressive looking. Here's our mold made Overbite. And again, no molding differences between these guys, just a lot of color differences. Overbite, he does a little better on the paint than some of the other G1 Seacons, but again, still a little bit short compared to this guy, but not too bad. They both just have very, very different color schemes. Overbite is definitely the more colorful of the two, but his colors are also just kind of an eyesore. He's the odd one out with the G1 Seacons because he doesn't have another Seacon that he really matches in color. He does his own thing because by default he is their weapon, right? So he doesn't have to match another arm or leg if you use the default configuration, or the Japanese default anyway. Because with these G1 Seacons, they were basing their colors more on the cartoon than the toy, so it's not going to be exactly how the toy was. So yeah, his colors are just weird and kind of patchy looking. I kind of prefer the more just somewhat simple, more organic look of Sea Phantom, but at the same time Sea Phantom's very plain, so I don't know, I'm kind of torn on these guys. Again, they kind of fail to excite me like the other ones, the other Seacons do. They're just the odd ones out, the rejects. Sorry guys, but can't all be winners. Now we have Sea Phantom's robot mode. And again, he's just my least favorite. I don't know what it is. Very plain. It's got a little tiny head. Makes him look kind of like a doofus. On the plus side, he gets a pretty wicked barbed sword and a big old gun, so at least he's heavily armed. And yeah, he's okay. All the tolerances are fine. The elbow, it's a little bit loose when holding this big rifle here, but not too bad. You can still pose it, but it may give it a gravity a little bit. And everything works the way it's intended to. One of the few Combiner Wars-esque figures that actually has wrist swivel, so that's always nice. Get some more posability out of him. And yeah, everything just works just fine. He also has that chest flap thing, so you can, if you want to, put his Combiner hand on there. You could store it elsewhere, but not really a great place for it, so as usual, I'm leaving it off. Here's Overbite again, and I think in this case, Overbite, his colors play off a lot better in the robot mode than they do the beast mode. I especially like the gold face plate or the gold mouth plate right there that he has. Pretty unique. You don't see that a lot. And yeah, I think his colors just play into his overall look better. They flow better in this mode. And I gotta say, he's probably a bit more interesting than Sea Phantom is. Sea Phantom is very plain. He's mostly white with like a gray abdomen and some gold highlights. That's about it. So I know I keep coming off as super negative with these guys, and I don't mean to. I want to love them, but they're just, they're okay. Now for our last member, this is Terramander, who is of course a recolor of Kraken or Sea Wing, if you prefer. And as such turns into a manta ray type monster. He's got these, he still has the weird backwards legs that are just Cutthroat's legs, but backwards. I wish, man, if they had retooled anything from the first set or this set, new legs that made more sense than just backwards bird legs would have been nice. He has the tail that, points downward, but has a new tail, I think, for sure. And most of his parts have been, heavily retooled, so that's good. Retooled from Cutthroat, of course, not from Kraken. The weapon storage does give him the really cool mohawk. That's probably one of the cooler looking ways to store all of his extras. So you can go with that if you want to. You can take it off and just keep his little, underwing blasters on if you'd like. that gives him a much more streamlined appearance. And if you want, you can like pull the legs back and have him swim, or maybe even like tuck him up. Tuck him away might actually look better. Helps fill out that middle section a bit. Up to you. But he, like Silagon, has a lot of gold. And I love it. It looks so good. They picked such a just gorgeous shade of gold for this guy. Yeah, I mean, I can't hate it at all. It got the green border around the red eyes there. It's got a little bit of that copper color painted onto his, I guess, like wing claw things. Overall, he's very neat looking. Something about his knees kind of makes me think of a Chinese restaurant. I don't know, like some of the decoration you'd see in there and the colors used. It might just be my hunger talking. I don't know. I kind of want some Chinese now. Here's Kraken for comparison, and you can see he's almost like photo negative to old Terramander here, and that instead of being mostly white, he's mostly black. Very, very dark color scheme. He's got the cool yellow eyes going on there. I don't know if there's one I prefer over the other because they both have some of the better color schemes out of their respective teams. Kraken I always thought was just very, very Batman-esque. Kind of reminds me of like the Batjet or something, which is always neat. And Terramander, again, just all that shiny gold. I love it. So, if you were okay with Kraken's beast mode and the weird backwards legs didn't ruin it for you, then you should like Terramander. This is Terramander's robot mode, and like his previous toolings, he's definitely the skinniest and most lithe looking of his teammates, which does make him a very neat looking robot. It doesn't make him the best limb. He's a little flimsier than pretty much everyone else. And that's something that's been a bit of an issue since Swoop and Cutthroat. They don't make the sturdiest limbs, especially when it comes to being legs. But anyway, for what he is, though, he's really cool looking. One of the more heavily armed Seacons, because not only does he have an axe-type weapon, hand cannon, but he's got little rocket launcher things on his wings, which is really sad because the mold he's based off of, Swoop, does not have his rocket launchers that are supposed to be under his wings. So it's almost like a slap in the face, Even with that upcoming Takara Volcanicus, they still didn't see fit to give Swoop just some extra missiles. Wouldn't have killed him. They had all this new stuff, didn't give Swoop wing missiles. Why do they hate Swoop so much? Poor guy. Yeah, again, this guy's tolerances are still spot on. They're nice and tight, nothing overly loose, at least, not compared to other versions of the mold. The legs are a little on the spindly side, and they kind of always have been. Here's Kraken again. And like I mentioned in their beast modes, these two really contrast each other. It's almost like Angel and Devil or something because of the wings. Again, not really a better or worse one. I think these guys are equally good in their own right. They're just kind of doing their different things, having different motifs. I will say one thing that is very interesting, kind of looking at them side by side, is the fact that Terramander has these light blue eyes, or light blue eye visor anyway, which is interesting because that's not usually an eye color given to like the bad guy characters, whether they're Decepticons, Predacons. It's usually reserved for the more heroic characters. So that is a nice touch. The cons, they typically go with like red or purple, sometimes yellow like this. You don't see a lot of blue. So I like that he can be a little unique in that capacity. And here's one more group shot of our rowdy band of space pirates. And again, just like their beast modes, they color match perfectly and they look like they're supposed to be part of a team. One guy that does stand out a bit in this case, and it's the thing that I said made him unique, is old Terramander here because he has those bright blue eyes and all of his teammates have red eyes. So he does stand out a bit, which is kind of ironic because he's based on the Swoop mold and Swoop is the Dinobot that stands out the most from the rest of his team because he's got the blue. Weird how that works, right? Just trend with blue and not matching the reds of their team with this particular mold. So interesting, right? Yeah, again, these guys, they just look great together. They really do. And they don't look too overcrowded. I honestly think 6 members is too much for a team. I think it just starts to get a little bit cramped. 5 is kind of the perfect number. Maybe if I could like hop in a time machine and just axe one of the G1 Seacons. Maybe the world will be a better place. Who knows? Right before we get into the meat and potatoes of this and finally show off God Neptune himself, I want to do one more big old group shot of the two different Seacon teams in the robot modes. And again, you get poor old Lobclaw, the straggler in the back, just being the dunce, sitting in the corner because he did something bad. But yeah, it is just cool getting to see these teams battle ready, side by side. Makes me wish I could have seen something like that in fiction and actually watched the two teams just attack something. Would have been great. See them really work together, especially outside of their combined forms. But it is what it is. Maybe one day we'll get that story. I mean, the comics are still ongoing, so it could happen. But yeah, each one of these teams, they bring something, kind of unique. Have their own little flavors here and there. These guys are meant to really just evoke some sort of aquatic theme and very much use those colors, or, colors that in the late 80s, early 90s you would associate with water. Think back to like video games. The new team goes for the much more unified look and are a bit more regal looking, but the trade-off to that is they're relatively plain. They use a lot of this pearly white plastic, which kind of makes them look unpainted, right? It kind of almost makes them look unfinished in a way. But they still also bring some nautical flair too, because you get that really deep sea green, you get this kind of rust-like color, which makes you think of being down at the docks. So they both do their own thing very well. Again, I really appreciate the retooling they did for Skilla here. It would have been just a shame if they had straight redecoed her from Tentakill. And yeah, I gotta say, so far I'm really happy with what I see. So now it is time. We're gonna go ahead and combine all these guys. I want to reiterate, the transformations I'm going to not include here for the sake of time. So if you want to see that, check out the King Poseidon review. It'll show you how to do all that. If you need instructions for how to do the actual limb modes, check out the individual reviews for the G1 Seacons. And with all that said, let's move on to the main event. So here we go. This is our combined form, God Neptune. And you can see he's just a really, really nice complete package. The better color coordination just helps sell this guy as an individual rather than like a hodgepodge of different bots. Now, as for the gun, I'll show you this here. This is how it looks according to like the official Takara stock photography. So this seems to be the combination that you want to use right here. So you can see how this works. You got the big gun as the base, you get the long white one here, gold one on top, these two on the side, and then these two white ones we're going to plug into the side after you attach the little manta fin gun things to the bottom of them. So that's apparently how it's supposed to look. And we can go ahead and give him his gun. Big old honking cannon that he's got. Makes him very front heavy, so you definitely want to use it to kind of prop him up a bit. Now this guy does unfortunately suffer the same problem that Predacon or King Poseidon does, in that he has a tendency to lean forward. And it's a combination of his ratchets, which have some give, but really more so the connection to the ankles here. This is them connected like straight up. You can see how he wants to lean forward, because it's got a lot of give that allows that to happen. Unfortunately, that means that the best way to stand him is to actually kind of lean his torso back like one click, and that should balance things out a little bit. And that does seem to be a common problem with combiners that have articulated feet. The articulation does give them that little bit of, forward and backwards, uncontrolled rocking that does require some compensation in the legs. So just be aware of that. You are going to run into that issue with him just like you do with King Poseidon. But some careful posing and like very deliberate placement of his weapons, like using his gun as kind of a third leg, will help alleviate that a lot. Mentioning King Poseidon, here he is in all his glory. And the biggest difference between these two is obviously the sixth member, which becomes a Target Master-like gun for the Combiner. Now luckily the sixth member isn't necessary because the Combiners do get their own very large weapons assembled from the smaller guns of their component members. And they actually come out to be roughly about the same length, honestly, so kind of works out. Now, there is apparently a 6th member of the God Neptune team that is a recolor of Lobclaw, at least in fiction. It was shown in the manga, but the character was put out of commission before they ever had a chance to form with him. And, that does explain his absence in the toy, but it also now brings up the idea that there was a 6th member originally, he just didn't exist. So it does make one wonder if that is some planned exclusive down the line. I mean, they did make kind of a big deal about him. So I don't know if that's a plan that maybe they'll just release him separately. I don't know. On one side, I kind of good if they don't, because as cool as the whole extra member, the Target Master feature is in theory, we've seen with King Poseidon that in practice, our current combiners are just really not meant for that. They're not meant to carry all that weight. Because as you know, the hip and knee joints of your arm bots, they're not ratcheted and they're really not meant to hold up that much weight. Especially at such a bad leverage point, all the way out past their feet onto this extra hand piece. It's very difficult to get them to hold it up, if not just completely impossible. So that's just something to consider when determining whether or not we actually want a 6th member. So again, it's really cool. I would have hated if they did King Poseidon without including all the members, but once we got the total package, it's very unwieldy. So I'd be okay if they just kept God Neptune as a 5-bot combiner. And when it comes to the tolerances, these guys are pretty much identical as far as I can tell. I don't really notice any major difference. Now that does also kind of become an issue because when I was doing the King Poseidon review and doing the different combinations for the character, I was pointing out that the 2 weakest bots when it comes to forming legs were Tentakill and Kraken here, or the Manta. They have a tendency to want to bend in the middle because of how they're built. Well, they went and took those molds and made them the legs for this guy. Now, it's nothing new. They always have been, but, that was a different toy with much less articulation. It was a lot sturdier. This time, in order to keep things faithful, you do have to use the 2 components that are more likely to just kind of bend over in the middle with too much weight. So that is going to affect stability a little bit. And we saw that coming. We already knew what components went where on this guy and kind of predicted that that might be an issue. Now, it's not super bad. I haven't so far had any issues with him flopping over. But, once you try to get some more extreme poses out of him, you may run into some problems there. So just be aware of that. If it becomes too much of an issue because of, the design itself or the overall tolerances of your specific figures, it may be worthwhile considering swapping members around, because even though it's not accurate, it'll be more stable. Okay, we got our guy all nice and posed up now, and I'm shocked. Look at this. This elbow is actually able to hold the weight of this gun here. Very sturdy, too. I mean, it's not flopping or anything. It's really holding it up there. So I'm impressed. I didn't think they could pull that off. So, it looks like even the sum total of all the accessories aren't enough to actually weigh down the elbow, at least on this guy, and at least on my copy. Again, mileage may vary. I do remember this mold having the tightest knee/elbow joints on the King Poseidon set, so it does kind of make sense, though I didn't think they'd actually be strong enough to hold up all those weights. So that's really impressive. Part of me wonders if they actually went and tweaked the molding a little bit just to make it extra tight. Specifically because they knew it would have to hold this up. That might just be me grasping at straws. But yeah, that's awesome. You could actually get quite a bit of posability out of this guy. And the trident itself isn't very heavy compared to the gun, so it's a lot easier to hold. Plus, weight displacement's a lot better because it's pointing straight up and down. Yeah, that's great. That's great. This guy seems to pull off his posability a lot better than King Poseidon does. So, even more reason to pick this up. I mean, how cool does that look? How often do you get a combiner that can do that? I'm impressed. Hats off. So, yeah, I think that kind of wraps everything up. We've seen all the individual members and their different modes. We got a good look at God Neptune himself, all of his posable, color-coordinated glory. And I gotta say, I highly, highly recommend this combiner. Now, I know some people are rolling their eyes like, oh, easy for you to say. Oh, it's so hard to find. And yeah, it's true. it's going to be difficult to find if you didn't jump on that pre-order from the beginning. And it's not cheap. It came in at just under $200 with tax and everything for me. So, I mean, it's cheaper than King Poseidon was, but King Poseidon also had a 6th member, so, you know, he's going to be more expensive. But I will say, if you have the cash and you can find one, I think you'll be very happy with him. This is by far one of the coolest combiners I own, if not the coolest. And honestly, if you have neither of these guys and you want one of them but don't know which one, I'd go for God Neptune. He's just such a better looking robot. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love King Poseidon / Predacon. He's very cool for what he is. His colors are more, I guess, nautical in appearance. But he's also harder to get because, you know, they were sold individually at different points in time. He's got 6 members, which I guess you could choose to ignore one. And he doesn't feel as good as this guy. So if you do want my recommendation, I would say pick up the God Neptune box set before you pick up King Poseidon. I think you'll be happier overall. It's such an amazing set. You know, it's something that is a retool of an extensive retool. And the paint apps on this guy and the coloration, I would say, is more premium than they were on King Poseidon. And King Poseidon was no slouch there, but just, I mean, this beautiful silver and gold paint everywhere, the bronzish paint, and again, all these like metallic looking parts, aside from some of the kind of flat silver ones, are paint. So concerns about potential, you know, embrittlement down the road are pretty minimal. And, you know, even these silver-ish or grayish parts, they look soft enough. They don't look like that kind of metallic plastic that's going to get brittle over time. Of course, you know, we should check back in about 20 years, see how this thing still holds up. But yeah, God, I love this thing. And I think if you're planning on picking it up or, you know, still on the fence or you got it on pre-order, you're going to love it too when you get it. Now that I have said my whole spiel, what I want to know is what you all think of this set. As far as those of you that don't have it, are you planning on getting it? Were you not planning on getting it and this changed your mind? Or if you do have it already, what do you think of this guy? I want to hear your thoughts now that you got him in hand. And, you know, are you as blown away by it as I am? Was your copy as sturdy as this one is? Any and all feedback's always welcome in the comment section. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to toss it a like. Let YouTube know you want to see more stuff like this. If you do want to see more like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you always get a heads up when I post something new. And thank you for joining me for this look at the brand new TakaraTomy Transformers Generation Selects God Neptune. And with all that said, I will see you next time.